Good afternoon. It's our lunch and learn. It's 12 o'clock on a gorgeous Thursday in the Bay Area. And for all of us living here, this is the first day that we don't have fog, we don't have overcast in the city, and it's just grand and glorious. And there's nothing more grand and glorious than to spend the next, 45 to 50 to 55 minutes with our friend who literally kicked off the sfBIG year. We were reliving it. I thought it was January, and it was February 6th. And what a remarkable hour. Kicking off his, the publication of his new book. And literally about 3 weeks ago, Kristin and I were kicking around like that book seemed like it was just written yesterday, and how apropos, in life before March 15th and life after March 15th. So we thought it would be great to ask our friend Rishad to come back and just sort of reflect for, a bit, because you have had a remarkable book tour. You've had a remarkable webinar post world. So, and here's Kristin, and, we're both delighted to talk to you. I thought asked some great questions. So I'm going to ask the first one, then turn it back, and she's going to take it, and we're going to go back and forth. But what's it like now did you write the book about a month ago, or did you really write it in 2019?
So the last time I touched my book was July 2019, was the last time I finished editing it, and then it was out of my hands. And so a lot of people believe I wrote it in February or March of 2020, which I did not. And in fact, a lot of people have said this book is COVID-19 optimized. And the reason it was COVID-19 optimized, and no one could know about COVID-19 in July 2019. The earliest you could know is December 2019 if you were in Wuhan and if you figured out everything. And I think the reason that it resonates is because I was writing about the internet intersection of people and change and globalization and technology. And what we now have is a virus that came from one part of the world that is creating massive change. We are utilizing technology to offset some of our, like we are right now with Zoom, if that makes sense. And so in effect, it's all about human beings, because we begin to realize that we may have, while we continue to use technology and the technology companies are doing particularly well, it is human beings that matter the most, and what we're often losing and not having are these personal human relationships. And so this book talked about the importance of human relationships. And the book talked about how you manage change. And the book talked about how you manage distributed workforces, without me knowing that the reason we were going to be distributed was because of COVID-19. And so that's why people said, did you know? And I said, no, I did not know, because if I knew, I would have shorted airline stocks. I did not know.
Well, before I turn it to Kristin, number one, we want to welcome everybody on behalf of sfBIG. And this is designed to really be in the dog days of August. This is a chance to talk to our friend again and to continue conversation. If you have any questions, pop them up and we'll go back and forth. But this is just really, and there's some really good people I see on here that I know will have tons of questions will come along. So Kristin, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, John and Rishad. It's wonderful to see you again, even in these remote conditions. So thanks for being with us.
As I mentioned to you yesterday, you did not want to see me again in person, so you launched a virus in the world.
I think that we would love nothing more to be back at China Live and just having a live discussion among humans and enjoying food and some coffee and each other's company. It just is amazing, how things can change so quickly. So for the group, if any of you didn't have the chance to join, in early February, I had the honor of interviewing Rishad while he was talking about his new book. Rishad, plugging the book, everybody.
Thank you.
It really is a wonderful book, and we spent some time talking about the different topics. and it was part of your book tour. So I think if maybe we could just start with, we're all dealing with our own sort of issues and adjustments with this new world that we're living in. But, you presumably flying all over the world every single week, you're on a book tour promoting your book. How has your life changed? What's your day-to-day look like now? And how have you adapted to what's going on in the world and still pushing forward your book and your personal brand? And how are you looking at the world right now and what it takes to be successful?
Sure. First of all, again, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all the many, many people who are attending this. So, the first and I think most important thing is that I was very fortunate, and the biggest good fortune we have is, so far myself and my family has remained healthy. So that is critical. And I think the importance of something as simple as good health has been underlined to us. I'm also very fortunate, unlike a lot of other people, which is in where I was in my particular career. I did not need to have a full-time job. And obviously many, many millions of people have been affected. And so in many ways, because I did not need an income and I did not anyway have a job, my perspective is one of somewhat unusual, because in effect, it's not what a lot of people have to grapple with. And for that, I am grateful and lucky. I sort of start off with that. With regard to the book, I was also very fortunate with the timing on the book, because I was with you all on February 6th. The book came out on January 27th, but the book tour started on January 4th. So I had the ability to go on the book tour all through January. And my publisher basically featured my book all across the bookstores of America, including a special emphasis on the airports of America in February. So they gave me shelf space specifically in the month of February where people were still flying. My last trip was actually, I had gone down, and because my book had tended to be a human book, so it's crossed across all sorts of categories. So my last two trips were, I'd gone down to speak to Blue Cross Blue Shield, right, and a bunch of medical practitioners. And my last trip was actually to Birmingham, Alabama, where I'd gone to see 125 lawyers. It was a large legal firm, major South, to talk about my book. And when I flew back, and since then I've not flown. And to give you sort of an idea, between January 1 and March 12th, I flew 28 times. Between March 12th and August 12th, which is exactly 5 months, I've flown 0 times. So one is obviously there is that. Second is because of the timing of the book tour in the second half turned completely into a virtual tour, which was webinars. And I actually started keeping count, because I was mentioning to John, I actually had a daily diary, so I can tell you exactly where I was at any particular stage. So this one, if we consider it a webinar, between March 12th and today is my 53rd webinar. Wow. So I've done 53 webinars and 48 podcasts. So I've got basically sort of 100. So I switched completely into that. And because of two things, one is because my book resonated with people, and the other is because I'm lazy, which means if anyone has ever seen me present in my entire career, I do it without notes, slides, or video, which basically means I'm Zoom optimized, right? So more and more companies were basically saying, we need you to talk because you don't need all the slides and the videos, etc. So that has been well. And what has tended to basically happen is my days now are in Chicago, pretty much in Chicago, and as those who have read my book know, I have this strange habit of getting up very early in the morning, which in the book I say is 4:30 a.m. That has been modified. It is now 4 a.m. Wow. And the reason it is 4 a.m. is because I work out every morning. And in the early days, when everything was closed, including I used to go to an outside gym, but that's all closed. Inside, so I figured out that I could run up and down. I live in a condominium, so I could run up and down the parking lot. So I figured out if I went up 7 floors and down 7 floors 4 times, it was the 4 miles that I ran. And then when the fitness center opened, you have to make appointments. and it opens at 5 a.m. and they clean it in the night. So I go in at 5 a.m., there's nobody and it's completely clean. So I changed I usually would spend the first hour studying, but now I go running instead or doing something of the sort. And then I have a protocol. So if you notice, I'm dressed up in a jacket, etc. So I pretend that nothing has changed, okay? So I actually make myself breakfast out on the balcony, come in, get myself dressed like I'm going to work or I'm off on a basic tour. And I have a particular protocol, and in there I have certain times where I go for a walk with my wife and do a whole bunch of other things. And most of what I do is clustered between the morning in Chicago between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. Because I still do a lot of global stuff, and most of Europe and some of Asia, the morning works. And then once in a while, it'll be 9 or 10 in the night when I have to do Singapore. Because the other thing that's become very interesting is, in a very strange and odd way, this has allowed me to reach more people faster than if I had to fly, right? And this is one thing that all of you all who are senior or not so senior among this crowd should be aware of, that it's far more easier to get access to the senior most people in companies than ever before. So I zoom in to a CEO's home, which I could not do before.
Great advice.
I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. But what's also extraordinary is this. They're asking why all the people around them what they are doing. Because they began to realize that many senior people have many people around them who do nothing but do two things. They serve as gatekeepers, preparing decks and serving as gatekeepers. And they say, I don't need no gatekeepers. What do they do? What do they do? And the second is they serve as mirrors. They basically serve as mirrors to management, telling management what they think management wants to see, right? And so one of the things that's become very popular, one of the chapters in my book is called The Turd on the Table, which is how you tell truth to power.
One of my favorites.
So literally, and I'm not exaggerating, I have an ongoing relationship with 5 FTSE 100, which are European, and 7 Fortune 500 CEOs, where once a month or once every 2 weeks, I dial and zoom into them and basically just have a conversation. And the conversation, they'll tell me, think about this, tell me what you think about that. And then I tell them, go look at this, read this, look at that, watch this, watch that. And they say, how come nobody ever told me that? I said, I don't know. Right? And so one thing I will tell you is make sure that as you restart or start, you're going to have a completely different management structure in companies who basically are going to be truly much more faster, much more agile, and much more adept than they've ever been.
I won't take that question. It's July 1, 2021. Looking back, what are two or three big changes that have evolved in our workplace, in our workflow that you see?
So the three big changes I basically see are the following. The first is a physical change, and the physical change will basically be many companies are going to plan their workforce with the following question. Until December 29, 2019, people would ask you, why are you not at work, right? And you basically say, I'm on vacation, I'm ill, the babysitter didn't come, something like that, right? The question they're going to ask you is, why do you have to be at work? So they're basically planning their life. All companies are planning about why do you have to be at work? And they've figured out that you have to be at work for 3 reasons. So I'm not saying people aren't going to be back at work, but they have to be for 3 reasons. One is infrastructure. So infrastructure means you require certain things, like you're a dentist. You have to be at a dentist's office. You can't do this at home, right? You're basically creating new products for Apple, which require hardware and require foundry equipment. So you have to go back to whatever. But for a lot of people, you don't have to go. So that's infrastructure. A second reason that I'm not talking about white collar workers, right? Not the really important workers who are actually working out there. This is about us. The second reason that you have to do that is for significant client meetings. So there is a client meeting that can't be done on Zoom, right? So you basically then have a client meeting. And the third is basically to collaborate and for training, which is you require interaction with your teams or you require training. So companies are basically doing the following. They're rethinking their physical space to make it that way. And they're also reducing their core space, which is in their headquarters cities or in the main cities, and making satellite and suburban places where people can meet. So you heard today REI decided not to move in to their headquarters outside of Seattle, which they've spent millions of dollars doing. If you read the earnings results of the other company that people don't pay attention to, which is everybody pays attention to, WeWork, but there's their competitor, Regus, which is known now as IWG. They're actually showing what demand is, and the demand is for now shared workspaces in suburban cities. Because what's basically happening is companies are saying, you can come, if it's a client meeting or a significant training meeting, you come downtown. If you need to meet with your team, why don't you find something nearer you? Because also many of the downtown offices have a slight problem. It's called the elevator. So that's a physical change. The next change basically is a change of how work gets done. And one of the reasons, and this is the scary part, and I don't want to be in any way negative, but I'm just going to say the only negative thing I'm going to say today, because my book and I tend to be optimistic, is the University of Chicago year, which I happen to be close to, did a study that said 42% of furloughed jobs are not coming back. That might be a number that's high, but I would say probably 20 to 25%. So one of the reasons that the stock market is doing very well, besides the fact that most of it is really the technology companies, right? But even so, the other companies are only down or up 2 or 3%, which is pretty formidable when you consider about it, is because what stock markets love is when companies do the following 3 things. They cut their costs, and there are 3 major costs for companies, 4 major costs for companies. Interest rates, lower than before. Real estate costs, lower than before. People, I can kick them out now, and I don't have to basically explain to anybody why I'm kicking them out. I mean, I don't bring them back, right? And the last is the cost of supplies or raw materials, most of which there's not enough. So the cost of doing business has shrunk much more than the decline in revenue. So they love that, and businesses are automating, and businesses are also getting rid of other businesses. Like Airbnb got out of a lot of businesses, they're focused. So as a result, one of the key things is companies are going to have balance sheets that are much more stronger. And as a result, they're going to make their workers work much more flexibly. So in effect, all of us are going to be working under a studio model of a Hollywood studio, which is we're going to get in for projects versus anything else. That can be good or bad, but that is a thing that people have to recognize, which is the nature of how people gather together for work, and not just physically, but what work is has changed, because companies are beginning to realize that, yes, there are some disadvantages with virtual work, but it actually happens, right? And there's a whole bunch, and there are some advantages in flexibility, in getting diverse workforces. That's the second one. The third one is this, which is a society thing. And this is not a political thing. So I don't care if you love Trump or you love Biden or you love whomever, okay? But here is my basic belief. Number one, we're going to have universal health care of some sort. I don't know what they'll call it, whatever it's called, Trump care, Biden care, whatever care it's called. When 35 million people lost their job and they lost their health care at the same time, and a government that said had no money found $3 trillion and another $3 trillion from the Fed, that joke is over. That's done. Okay, there's going to be universal health care. And when you have in the future much more flexibility, if you want me to be flexible, but I can't get healthcare unless I work in a company, where's my flexibility? So you're going to have universal healthcare. The second thing you're going to have is the rise of unions. Make no mistake, the frontline workers are not going to be happy, rightfully so, at $15 an hour. The reality of it is, you try to live even in cities that is in San Francisco and New York, on a family of 4 or even a family of 2 at $15 an hour. It is not possible. It is not possible. So what you're going to basically see is much stronger unions, because the frontline workers have figured out that you and me can be outsourced to Costa Rica. They cannot.
A great point.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying it's a good thing. And the third thing is, you're going to basically see, after a little while, once the economy gets a little bit better, higher taxes. You're going to basically see higher taxes on corporations. You're going to see people closing loopholes. You're going to see higher taxes on technology companies. You're going to basically see higher taxes. So higher taxes, more unions, universal health care. It sounds like a socialist agenda. I'm just telling you, that's what I think. So those are the different changes.
We got a couple of questions. I'll take the first one and Kristin can take the second. What are your thoughts on organizations supplementing or reimbursing employees for their work from home setups? Do they owe their employees anything? Is it a one-time payment, annual reimbursement, especially if companies are saving money on real estate and supplies? That was a Facebook thing that they sort of did here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, a lot of the technology companies have done that, and I would say more and more companies are basically doing that. I'm no longer an employee of Publicis, but I remain connected to a lot of the senior people there. I do stuff for them, and I also do a lot of stuff with a lot of other non-technology companies, these FTSE CEOs, etc. Every one of them are basically starting to create budgets, which you will see in 2021. And the budgets will not be just $1,000 budget. It'll be actually higher. I mean, obviously, depending on the country. But you're going to see between $2,500 and $5,000, right? And you're going to see it for three different things. You're going to see it, one is for technology, including, by the way, potentially, then the other thing you're going to do is they're going to help you, they're going to underwrite a place like a WeWork office or things like that, the equivalent of that you can go to, where you connect with people because they believe that you may feel lonely, whatever. And third is they're actually going to underwrite gatherings and get-togethers. The company that has done it the best for many, many years, and has done it, I think, for 7 or 8 years, is Automatic, the people who own WordPress and Tumblr. They're a 1,500-person company that has worked virtually, but they have these gatherings, they underwrite certain things, they sell physical cakes for birthday parties. So a lot of companies are seeing what's the best. So they're going to basically do that. So it's just not going to be a technology interface. And the other area that they're going to put a lot of money in, and that's the one I'm helping them, because that's the one I can do since I don't make cakes, furniture, or anything else, is training. Because people have to be trained and retrained. The investment you have to put in intellectual capital and people capital is the critical thing. It's going to be the big issue, because not only are people going to have to be thinking about how to lead and change and manage and upgrade themselves better, but they're also going to basically have to think about new skill sets. And we have underestimated how important training is going to be. So they're going to put it there too.
Rishad, we have another question that is similar to the question that was just asked. So outside of the things you just discussed, what extent do you see some of these changes enduring past the point where mass vaccinations have occurred? What is going to return and what is not going to return to normal?
So the things that are going to return are the things that we are missing the very most right now, right? Which is three key things. The first thing that we miss is connection with each other. So when there is a mass vaccination, people will go out of their way to go to restaurants, vacations, sports, events, Las Vegas, all those places, because that happens to be a human thing. We are by its very nature, outside of people who are prickly and porcupine-like, we like connecting with people. And there is a human touch interaction that makes life worth living. So you're going to see a lot more of that than ever before. So I think that, so it'll go, I'm not saying it's going to 100%, but where I think travel will be, there'll be much more personal travel than maybe corporate travel, which you'll get to. But I think there'll be travel, restaurants, hotels, all of those things. So that is number one, which will go back. The second thing that will go back is, to a great extent, is people will actually go back to a world where they realize that we're living in a world where it's technology and people. It's carbon and silicon. We had basically tilted so much towards silicon that we basically forgot that there was a human part of it. And what this has reminded us, there is a human part of it. Right now, thank God for silicon, because we can connect this way. But in the end, we were always grappling with how do you combine the two, the carbon and the silicon, right? The analog and the digital. I think you're going to see more of that situation, but now basically saying this is what digital does really well. This is what analog does really well. This is what digital does to supplement analog. This is what analog does to digital. That's the same. And the third thing that you're going to basically see is you're going to see a continued a fragmentation. You're going to see larger and larger companies become more and more powerful and larger, regardless of what the FTC or others does. I'm not just talking about technology, but when all these small stores are closed, the Walmarts and the Costcos and the Targets get the business. When all the restaurants are closed, the Chipotles and McDonald's and everybody else gets their business, right? So you're going to see a little bit of that. And you're going to see companies of 1 or 2 or 10, smaller companies. And you're going to see there was already a hollowing out of the middle, and you're going to see the continuing hollowing out of the middle. So those are the things that are going to be normal, and the things that are going to be different, right? The things that I expect are going to be different is the following. I think the way companies work will be different for the reasons I basically say. There'll be less corporate travel, not there won't be corporate travel, but for instance, I'm going to say, do I really have to fly, which I used to do? I have to fly for a 2-hour meeting to Oslo, right? Now, I've been to Oslo twice. If I'd never been to Oslo, I'd fly. But why do I have to fly a third time to Oslo for 2 hours? Is it really necessary? So there's going to be a big thing, but do I physically have to move myself as much? That's going to be one. The second thing really is going to be every single company management has been zoomed into the future. There is not a single person who doesn't understand where technology is going. So there's going to be a thing that's going to be zoomed into the future. And because of that, what you're going to see is the boardrooms of companies are going to pay a lot of attention, which is what I'm helping them to do, on making sure that they realize that these major platforms, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, right, are both massive opportunities and massive existential threats to their business. And these are not advertising platforms. They're society operating systems, but on top of which are next generation business operating systems. And for each of them to get their next trillion, they're going to have to come and disrupt the people who pay them the most. So if you think about it, the biggest advertisers on Google are the travel companies. And right now, who are the travel companies being most disrupted by? Google, right? 46% of Google searches go to Google.
Mm-hmm.
That was brought up at the FTC. So I'm trying to remind people that don't make this about what Carolyn Everson says on Facebook. This is about advertising. Forget about advertising, even though I was in the this is not that. This is basically about business, strategy, data, next generation. And boardrooms must pay attention, not the CMO. I'm all for the CMO, and decide that. And that's the big change. You should see the boardrooms. That's one of the reasons, by the way. And the other thing that's going to change, partly because of this, partly because of Me Too, partly because of Black Lives Matter, is the young people in an organization are pressurizing the senior people like never before. Like never before. I will tell you this without naming names. 4 of the 12 CEOs I work with, one of the reasons that they boycotted, and all the 12 that I work with boycotted, because I explained to them why it made sense. Okay, but 4 of the 12 boycotted it in addition, and not because of me, they already knew what they were doing, but 4 of the 12 said one of the big pressures we had were from our young people. They said, what are you talking about purpose and values? Show up, right? So I'm very, very hopeful that the next generation is coming to save us.
Absolutely. And I think just to touch on that specific point, because we've talked about this in prior lunch and learns that we've had, but I think that it was certainly really positive to see how many organizations took a stand, participated in the movements going on. But I think now what either young people, either representing their customers or their employees, are pushing for, but I think it's a mixed bag in terms of what the actual output is showing the receipts, so to speak, of how they're actually going to make good on those. And I think that's the piece that's still yet to be seen. So curious how you're advising on the next step with those CEOs and companies you're talking to.
So almost everybody, and I'll do a generic thing of what I'm suggesting to people. Obviously for every company it's different, etc. But generically, this is what I would tell anybody who's on this call, on this thing, to think about for their business, for their client, for their agency, for whomever. This is what I would think, sort of thing. That whatever plan you do with any platform or any partner, recognize that they are going to be around, they're going to be extremely important, and they are actually partners. There's no use hating upon these people. These are not bad people. These are all good people, right? These are good platforms. However, they happen to not care about your company. They care about their company. You have to care about your company, which is, so don't just say they, and don't think about them narrowly, think about them broadly. So that's the first thing. So pay attention, right? Decide how you want to partner with them. And don't think this is about an advertising deal. It is not. Advertising is one of the things, but it's more. The second is whatever plan you have, you need to have a plan which is a 1 year, 2 year, and a 3 year plan. Okay. So my advice is the 1 year plan, to a certain extent, is try to basically put pressure on them and think about how you are going to fund resiliency in your supply chain to consumers. So every business is thinking about their supply chain, because a lot of business supply chains have been affected either because of globalization, China, COVID-19. Remember, Wendy's ran out of beef in many stores, right? So there was a supply chain problem. The reality of it is we were depending on masks from China. That's a supply chain problem. And so up to now, the supply chain has been about efficiency, but now it is going to be also about resiliency. It's going to be both efficiency and resiliency, which is you may have to pay more because it is good for the business, even though it's not the cheapest decision. And therefore, you may have to go off being completely addicted to a big platform and do other things because it's the right thing to do. So resiliency while pressurizing them for all the right things, right? Which is number one, which is do not let them off the hook. It's your money. It's not their money, right? And it doesn't matter, by the way, yes, 80% of Facebook's money comes from, small and medium-sized businesses, and their revenue has not been hurt and their stock price has not been hurt. But I can tell you that they're now paying attention like never before. And this thing has got the boards. The boycott has been absolutely successful because 1,000 Fortune 500 boards are now paying attention, right? So forget about anything else. So that's number one. The second thing, which is a medium-term thing, is think about what are different ways, right, that you can basically build first-party data and direct relationship with consumers. A simple thing as email is going to be the equivalent of Disney Plus in a world of 5G, right? An email connection in a world of 5G is a direct video connection to your customers. So build your own do not let a platform own your customer, own your data, own the relationship, and make you just a factory. Don't ever let that happen. Okay, you sort of let it happen, but you will never succeed. So what are the other things you can do? Because in effect, you need optionality. And the third one is a perspective, which is my perspective, which probably people don't like, but most of my board members like, but right, is I truly believe these companies, the big ones, have to be broken up. So basically, they are lobbying like hell. Take all your goddamn lobbying money and lobby against them, right? Have the FTC go at it. So you basically do short-term resiliency, medium time looping around them, and massive lobbying. All fronts, all the time, all years, and move massive amounts of lobbying, money, dollars, and investments. That's what I tell them. And that's the plan. It isn't 1 month of when I'm, stopping advertising. That's not the plan. That's the start of a plan.
There's a question from the audience, but wow, that's a big statement, what you just said. And we're in a market where two of those companies are going to be talked about a lot that I have a feeling you just mentioned. Let's just assume those two unnamed Valley companies. That's massive. That's not only a C change, that's a D change, that's an alphabet change.
Look, here's the stuff. Let me be very clear, right? Let's assume for a second that I'm not as dull as I look and I know something about digital and data. Okay? We only have monopolies. We don't have duopolies. Just like, people use new normal, and I said, what are you talking about? There's no new normal. It's a new strange. Explain to me what a duopoly is. I know. I went to the University of Chicago. I'm working with the best people who are all about free markets who say the FTC is wrong. These are the people who came up with the policy and said we were wrong because we didn't realize that free and the consumer isn't what we should be focusing on. we should focus on citizen and we should also focus on buyers. Now they begin to realize there's an issue. Remember, when someone like Mark Zuckerberg says they will be back, right? Like, who the hell cares? They will be back. My basic belief to my CEOs is, yes, you should be back like Arnold Schwarzenegger was back. Okay? That gives them some gumption. My whole stuff is like, he's a guy, I'm a guy, he's going to die, I'm going to die. He has turds, you have turds. What the shit? So he's got very billions of dollars, but he's coming to pillage your company. What's that about? Like, who are you putting in there?
It's resiliency. I'm loving this.
Okay.
You're starting good questions.
Okay. Anyway, so the whole idea basically is Google is all about search, Facebook's all about communication.
Would you please go into further detail about why you believe the Facebook boycott was successful and what it means in the long term?
Sure.
Or was it successful?
Yeah. So the reason it was successful, first of all, you've got to decide what success is. So if you had decided the success was that it would impact their revenue or it would impact their stock price, which was never what any of these people wanted to do in the first place. Anyway, then you would say it has been diabolically unsuccessful because their revenue was fine and their stock price is fine, right? Because anybody who had half a clue knew that 85% or 80% of their revenue came from non-Fortune 500 companies. The reason it was successful is the following. The narrowest way it's been successful is I think it has given firepower to Carolyn Everson and her team. Because I've always basically believed that Carolyn Everson and her team are a world-class team, but they are not listened to in that company because that company has 3 divisions. There is a promotion division that brings in the money, which she actually is the face of, but it's run by David Fisher and Sheryl Sandberg, supposedly. Then there is a policy team, which Sheryl Sandberg runs, and then there's a product team, which Mark Zuckerberg runs. The product team and the policy team did not pay any attention to the promotion team, right? When 1,000 marketers, and including a lot of CEOs, are now having direct conversations with Sheryl, and all the old play acting of let's have a meeting, we apologize, let's have Sheryl make a call, and everybody laughs at that, basically means that they have to change. That's number one. Number two is if you take away the top marketers, right, what basically happens is Facebook looks like a broken down platform full of misinformation and small marketers, taking nothing away from small marketers. So one is it's worked because it's paid attention. The second is it's woken up the FTC, it's woken up the government, it's woken up the lobbyists, who now begin to realize what the real threat of these platforms are to business and to society. So it's worked for that reason. That's the second reason. And the third reason, as I said, that it's really, really worked is the board of directors of the Fortune 1000 companies are paying attention. And that is amazing when you think about the top companies paying attention, not as an advertising platform, when you basically see the government paying attention, when you now have internally at Facebook people saying what's going on. And by the way, these are numbers that I've begun to sort of see. The ability for Facebook to hire world-class engineers has declined significantly over the last 6 months. That is what will make Mark Zuckerberg wake up, right? So this has been very, very successful, but you cannot have successful based. Our problem is we have no imagination. We only look at stock price and revenue. If you look at stock price and revenue to run a company, every leader should shoot themselves. An AI machine can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best example, this is a little bit of an outdated reference, but just to take it back to the Kendall Jenner Pepsi situation, where people were outraged and thought, how the heck did they pick Kendall Jenner? And I think anybody that's in advertising sat back and said, I know exactly how they picked Kendall Jenner. Someone came into a boardroom and said, look at how many followers she has. Clearly this is the best one. People said the numbers say it, let's do it. And it's, you've got to keep the context and look at more than just the numbers if you're going to succeed. So.
It is, especially when we talk about how sophisticated AI is getting, right? As I try to remind people, I read this, I think it's true, but I read this but I don't know where. So that Moore's law, when it was working, the processing power of technology like doubled every 18 months. What I've heard is the equivalent in machine learning is every 6 months. So in effect, it's as a person with an advanced degree in mathematics, I keep away from the machines. They'll beat me. How do I supplement them? So you have to bring humans to it.
Well, Rishad, I think this is a good opportunity to maybe return back to your book because I think some of the topics are more relevant than ever, especially the need to be more human in this time that we're all super separated. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about some of the topics that you feel like are most salient right now, and then also bring in a question that's relevant as people are trying to apply these topics not only to their businesses, but to themselves, is how people should be thinking about future-proofing themselves to ensure ongoing employment in this changing market.
So before you do that, Rishad and Kristin, if you want to, we have a few copies of the book to give away. So if you'll drop Zach a note as a panelist, I think we've got 6 or 7 that, you know, I don't know how to play a game. We're not going to do anything, but if you're interested, drop Zach a note. We'll try to get some more, help people out for being here. We really do want to get your book out because your book is so important. So Kristin,
thank you.
Let Zach know. We'll send him out.
So a couple of quick things. The first is, I think I sent you a link, Kristin, which you can then add maybe to the notes or send to whoever attended here. So I've written a 12-page document called The Great Reinvention, which provides a detailed advice to people, businesses, and society how to move forward. It's outside of my book, and I wrote after the book. It is about COVID-19, since my book wasn't specifically about COVID-19. It's the most popular thing I've written besides 10 career lessons. And it is being used by many, many companies in their boardrooms because it ends up with these following 3 things. It talks about people, it talks about society, but where it ends up is this. I would say to everybody, just think of these 3 verbal terms when you think about your own career. The first thing I want you to think about is you are starting again, you're not restarting. Because what happens is when you take people and get them to start or stop doing something for 60 to 90 days, which is what all of us have done, and we're going to be starting and stopping for maybe 6 months or 9 months, behaviors change, expectations change. So any business plan you've written, including for your own plan, your own life plan, that was written in December of 2019 in your mind or in your heart, revisit it, right? This is about starting, it's not about restarting. This is very true when 2 things happen, when technology changes and mindset changes. We now know mindset is changing because of COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, a lot of things. We know technology is changing because, as I say in my book, the first age of tech, first connected age was about search and about e-commerce. The second, which was 2007, was mobile and social. The third one is what we're in the process of, which is about 5G, cloud, AI, 5G, cloud, AI, and voice, right? So those 4. So when those 2 things happen, completely new industries form. You know what people don't realize is after the Great Recession, when you also had the second connected age of mobile and social and the openings of AI, when GM and Ford came back, after that, they started focusing on each other. But guess what was born then? Uber and Tesla, right? And Schick and Gillette started focusing on each other. But guess what was born there because of social networks and YouTube? Dollar Shave Club and Harry's. So in effect, if you're working in a company, your category that you are in and your competitors are no longer the same as you move forward. For your own individual career, therefore, what I would suggest are 3 simple things. The first is try to reduce your cost of living as much as you can. Try to make sure that you do not let your dreams go away, okay? Because if anything else, you've now realized that time is not on your side or time will eventually run out. Why don't, your plan B was really your plan A, but your plan A is because you needed to have either an expensive lifestyle or impress somebody. Screw that. Okay, so use this to reduce your costs as much as you possibly can. And you can now because you can move to different places, you can do all kinds of things. So that gives you flexibility. That's number 1. Number 2, what I would basically do is truly spend 2 to 3 hours a day now, or an hour a day, really, not 2 to 3, that's what I do, an hour a day learning new things. Because you're going to have to upgrade your mental operating system because there is a new world. And the third, which is really, really hard to do because I find it hard myself to do, especially since I think I know the answers to stuff which I don't, is I try to build a case for the exact opposite of what I believe. So think about what your ideal plan of your life or your company or your business or your career was. Try to now, maybe with alcohol, marijuana, whatever, right? Think of basically why you might be completely wrong. Because one of the things I worry about, we're now living in such a polarized world, especially in the United States, in part because of the polarization of the country, in part because of the way media is polarized, that we aren't actually thinking anymore. So I go out of my way to build a case for the exact opposite of what I believe, and that's what I would suggest you do. So invest in time to educate, cut your costs so you can have optionality, and please think of the exact opposite of what you believe. And you can read the great Reinventing piece. It's absolutely free. Apparently you can get the book for free, but if not, it's only $12, which maybe you can afford.
Awesome.
Are you having
Thank
more
you.
fun now? Are you having fun?
I'm having, here's what happens. I'm having a lot of fun, but I'm having a lot of fun at the same time. I'm very, very concerned and worried. I'm very concerned and worried because, I live here in Chicago, and I'm sure it's true in every city. And Chicago, like many cities, we had like looting because we had like people coming, So I just had lunch with an old boss of mine he and I support a thing called the Off the Street Club, which supports 2,000 African-American folks in the West Side. And they can't go there anymore because some of the gangs came out of there. So the police are all around the place, right? And what I worry is that somewhere in our bubble, we don't realize that there is the real divided states of America I worry about is not necessarily the blue states and the red states. I don't worry about the people who are tech savvy and who are not tech savvy. I truly believe that if the next generation has no hope, then problems occur. And as a study of history, there are tens of millions of people who are losing complete and all hope. And we are not understanding that the ultimate goal is not to basically just think about yourself. We're living in a highly, highly connected world. So my biggest concern is because of COVID-19, you'll see in the thing I wrote this in April, and I basically kind of called that Black Lives Matter were going to happen. I didn't know this guy was going to get, unfortunately, murdered. But I said, look at these numbers. Something is going to crack, right? Because what was happening here in Chicago, 28% of the population is African-American. And initially, 75% of the deaths of COVID-19 were African-American, right? We're anti-immigrant, which I happen to be. So I like immigrants, but okay, nobody likes me, that's fine. But here's the deal. 15% of the people who are working out there, the frontline workers, 50% of the people are frontline workers. Of those, 27% are immigrants. So my whole stuff is, immigrants aren't only the people who are basically pulling fruit in California. They're everywhere here, right? And we think it's great to pay them $50 an hour. That's what I worry about. We've lost our humanity. And my whole stuff is, after a point, money buys you nothing but more space. How much space do you want? How many private planes and how many homes do you want? For God's sakes, give me a break. That's what I worry about. That leadership has forgotten that this is more than about themselves.
Yeah, go, Kristin. So
I was going to do a quick fire round of optimistic or pessimistic. We had a question about the state of the economy. So I got 4 topics. First one, state of the economy over 6 to 12 months, optimistic, pessimistic.
So I'm neutral. I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic. The reason I'm neutral is if you happen to be, if you are not well-to-do, and if our current president gets reelected, I am pessimistic for those people, but I'm very optimistic for people like myself who happen to have capital and short stocks, right? So it's kind of ridiculous, but it's odd. For the country, I'm a little bit pessimistic because we have to really take care of a lot of people, and that's my thing. So that's the election part. The second part, which I'm not completely familiar with, and I'm not absolutely certain, is when will a vaccine happen or not happen, and how much damage is being done to 3 fronts, which become a generational damage. So one is obviously a lot of the businesses that are closing down. So this is New York City. New York City has, I think, 240,000 small businesses that have 3 million employees. And the expectation is 80,000 of them are going to close down in the next couple of months, right? Which is 1 million jobs. That's a big problem. What's going to happen to the kids who don't go to school for a year and a half? What especially happens to the kids, like for instance, in the south side of Chicago, for whom school is also their breakfast and lunch.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
So
So how long will this go with this sort of a vaccination? So I'm worried, but I'm overtly optimistic for this very simple reason that if you study history, every decade or two, life gets better for a majority of people, not for any individual people. And even today, let's say on October 2019, it was better to be living in America in October 2019 than it was to be living in America in October 1999. Okay, and for a variety of reasons, not just because of like stock market or Netflix or computers, but gay rights, women rights, a whole bunch of other stuff. There's a long way to go, but I think humans progress. So I'm optimistic on that front. But you know, any given time, there's some segment that worries, and right now I worry about the disadvantage. And the reason I worry about the disadvantage is because that's when revolutions happen. When you've lost all hope, you do crazy. I mean, you run out of hope.
You touched on this, but it's back to school time. So optimistic, pessimistic about education.
So I really do believe that there are the person who's done the most thinking about education in a radical way is Scott Galloway. So he's who I read and listen to, and he's done a lot of thinking about it. I think education is going to be dramatically redefined. So I'll give you sort of a life philosophy I have, which sort of, I always ask people like, what is it like? What's your central thing? And most people don't understand what I'm talking about. I said, what do you think is fundamental? What do you think is foundational? How do you make your decisions, right? And so some people say I make decisions on where I can get the most money. I said, okay, once you get money, I understand that's important because if you don't have money, you can't have mortgages, kids, children. Fine. But what's fundamental? Like what eventually? So fine, you've got it. Now what? So I basically believe that at heart, life is about three things, right? It's about loss, love, and learning. That's what life is about. So my basic belief is loss, right? So love is, if you're lucky, you will have people who love you. You will love people. You will love what you do. You'll find your vocation. So you pursue love, right? Which is important. And love of all kinds, but that's what. It's about learning, because learning is what makes us different. What makes us different than monkeys is our brains. It's our mental operating systems. It's our experiences. It's how we grow. It's about learning. And the other one is about loss. And we will all suffer loss. There'll be three types of loss that we suffer, right? What's off is we lose accounts, we lose jobs, we lose, right? Second is we lose people, we lose loved ones. And third, we lose our lives, right? So we have loss. So I said loss is a given for everybody. If we're lucky, we'll have love and learning. The state can't do much about love. The state can do a lot about learning, right? And I truly believe that you must over-invest in education. You should have the highest jobs and highest things in education, because with education, you truly can set people free. And so I truly believe we have to revolutionize education. I don't know, obviously I'm not an expert at that, but I do believe it needs to be done. And education, very much like healthcare, and a third category that no one pays attention to, which is called finance, right, has to be radically rethought. So healthcare is about 18% of our GDP. I don't know how much education is. Finance is 11% of the GDP. And let me tell you, and I've had the ability to work with and see what the results of all of these people are. Just buy a low-cost ETF fund, you'll beat everybody, right? And as a result, what is this? All these buildings and banks and hedge funds and all of this crap. What is it, right? It's a big, big self-love thing going on. And that needs to be also, and that's going to be redone, as things go on.
I opened my class Tuesday night, my MBA class, and you know, the learning, love, and loss. I think those are the 3 L's. I mean, you know, Kristin, we could not end a better hour. Rishad, I think the 60 minutes with you is an MBA, a PhD, is the best learning. I know I see many of our friends, Payman and other people on there. You know, resiliency. There was so many takeaways.
So thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. Please read the piece. If you think I'm like mad, I probably am. I'm insane. I probably am. But you know what happens is, if you can't say what you think nicely and you don't have a voice, what's the point?
And again, if you want a copy of the book, you know, just drop Zach a note. I put it in the chat section. If we've got them, I'll send them out. sfBIG will get some more. Rishad, you've been generous to us twice. Kristin, as usual, you rocked that day, February 6th. You know you have an event when people want more. You know, love, loss, and learning. What a great way to end a beautiful day. I hope all of you have a great afternoon. Kristin, thank you very much. Thank you, Kristin. 70
Thank you
people.
both.
And thank you, John, and safe flight to your difficult place.
And for all of you, you know, we've been a bit quiet lately because we're obviously back renewing our membership, but we're coming back roaring right after, quote, Labor Day, whatever Labor Day means anymore. We've got some great things planned in September, and we are going to try to do a socially distanced. Our plan for golf is looking like it may happen, but all of you be safe, wear a mask, enjoy, happy Thursday. And I've got my 3 words: love, loss,
and
learning. Cheers. Happy afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Kristin,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye, Kristin. Thank you.